Welcome to Funnance, where your money becomes fun. I hold a master's degree in finance and did nothing with it professionally, but I used the concepts I learned to build wealth and economic freedom. I started this channel to help you do the same. Each video is a short explanation of a topic and how you can apply its concepts to your wallet, followed by a case study from my investing experience. I'm not selling you anything, but giving you knowledge. Okay, welcome to the third episode of Funnance, which is retirement and retirement accounts, which probably is not going to be the most fun episode, but it's we're going to get there. And you might be thinking, why is this coming up so early? But it's important. It's part of the reason of building wealth and getting to a place where you can breathe. And so again, just reaffirming the Funnance thesis is trying to make this stuff fun. I actually started my retirement account before I went to finance school. It's probably part of the reason, or a big part of the reason why I fell in love with finance and said, hey, I want to learn more about this, because it opened up a whole new world to me. I graduated art school from NYU, and I was working, making, $30,000 a year. I was living with my parents, and my accountant said, hey, you got to open up a retirement account and put some money into a traditional IRA. And that's what I did at 23 years old or 24, whatever it was. So let's back up. We just came back from setting up our checking account, getting set up in the banking world, in the finance world. And we hopefully started a Fidelity account, Charles Schwab, whatever, one that has access to the retirement accounts, and you want to go and open one up. We'll go into that in a second. But first, do have to do some, due diligence, some spinach and potatoes kind of talk, where we set this stuff up, and really before you deposit anything into your retirement account, you want to set up a emergency savings fund. That's a lot of financial gurus. Susie Orman, I think, is on the top of the mountain. And it is very smart. You want to have at least 3 months, probably 6 months is the Goldilocks, but a lot of times 8 and 9 months, even a year of expenses in case things go wrong. You lose your job. You have an emergency. Car breaks down. You have that access to the liquid cash. Liquid means cash, or quickly converted to cash. So once you have that emergency fund, kind of figure it out, what your rent is, what your expenses are, your food, your utilities, and then, times that by 6, 8, 12. So next went into, okay, well, if I'm trying to teach this as if you're just starting out. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who have their IRAs and their 401ks and their retirement accounts. Again, you can always skip and go over to the case study where we talk about, I think this one is going to be when I bought Apple right after Steve Jobs died, and the roller coaster that was. But you can skip ahead, but here we are. We're just going to, there's 1,000 videos on the differences between traditional and Roth IRAs, but I want to make this fun. So once you set it up, how does this become fun? Well, one is you're building an estate. You're building your wealth. And yes, you're putting this into a savings account that you can't really touch for a long time. You can for certain reasons. We'll get into that. But the thing that struck me is that, you put your cash in, and then we were going to start investing it and looking at funds and looking at all different things that will have a return, which is a lot more fun than me just talking about retirement accounts. But it's building your estate. This is cool. Like I said, I grew up poor. I was working at Madison Square Garden. I lived in Brooklyn on a 4th floor walk up. And every time I contributed to my retirement, I felt like, hey, no, I'm building something here. Maybe I'm suffering walking up 4 flights of stairs every time I want to go to the bodega and not, but I'm building it. And also this gives you that savings mentality of putting something away and saying, I can't touch it. if you put this into a savings account, you're going to be tempted to take it out. Once you put it into the retirement account, you have to go through a few loops if you want to take it out. And to not incur fees or penalties, you have to show your suffering, I forget the term, but your what is the term? Your distress, your whatever. You have to show your distress. You show your time of suffering, whatever that is. Okay. But it will also, the way that makes it fun is it shows the power of N. So here's the financial equation. Like we talked about in the first episode, this is N is time. N can be months, could be weeks, years, but this is where N is super powerful. And this is where, if you start saving when you're in your 20s, 40 years down the line, it's going to be remarkable and fun to see that return. Unless you do things very, very wrong, very repeatedly, year after year, you should see an increase. So we'll talk about the differences in the traditional and Roth. You can find that information anywhere. I'll just breeze over it. But my journey was just, again, let you know, is nothing started with a traditional to lower your taxable income. That's the accountant said, do that, because if you're making, I think, $30,000 a year, you put down 2,000. I think it's 1-to-1. Then your income is really 28,000. Again, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. This is not the point. The point is making this stuff fun and making you do it, and then becoming economically free and building wealth. So from there, then I think it's if you make a certain amount of money, you can't really use traditional anymore. It doesn't take down. But then you can go into the Roth, and Roth is where the tax benefit is when you're taking it out. It's not taxed. So later on in life. And then hopefully you get to the point where you're making so much. I think the household income is like 170,000 or something like that, where you can't even use these vehicles. These were created to help people, encourage people to save. And so once we're there, the stuff isn't useful, and we're investing in bigger and better things. And it's crazy how I was just part of a phone call with estate planners, and they were talking about required minimum distributions as if it was a problem, that they were like, I gotta take money out, and ways to mitigate the I just kept on thinking, my God, this is such good problems to have, man. They're so stressed out about their required minimum distributions. So yeah, hopefully we get there, that you're just like, I gotta take more money out. So let's make it fun. All right, so let's stop. We're gonna cut in here. This is the differences between traditional and Roth, but again, you're probably just gonna go with the traditional at first, and then we'll move on. Everything. If you learn more of my theory with finances, you should try everything a little bit. So you will hopefully in 10 years, 15 years time have both the traditional and Roth. So all right, here's the differences between the two. Let me just talk about really quickly something that I think most people go through, because I've heard it a lot and I went through it, was when you're starting out with this stuff, there's an attitude that you form, which is just like, hey, I don't want to know this stuff. I just want someone to tell me what is best for me, and then I just want to do it. I'm busy, and I had that before I fell in love with learning about this stuff. I started off working, I went to traditional. I think that's where you just want to go in the beginning. You want to lower your taxable income, especially if you're not making a lot of money. It helps with your taxes now, helps you with your situation now. So really quickly, let's just go over the rules. You have a maximum amount that usually increases once every year or 2 years, 3 years. It's usually something that Congress puts in the new spending bill or whatever. There is the big difference that we kind of talked about is that, all right, with traditional, your taxable income for that year goes down. And then when that money grows, let's say you put in $1,000 and let's say you retire and it's now $50,000. Well, when you want to take that money out, it's taxed as income. Okay, not the end of the world. The Roth IRA is, you put in $1,000 after tax. That's what you made that year. You don't get any taxable benefit really right then that year. But then money grows to, what do we say, $50,000. Now when you take that out, it's not taxed. So that's fantastic when you're then retired. That's essentially the big thing is the tax situation at that point. And I think for most people, traditional is the way to go at first. So yeah, I hope that helps. We'll in later videos we'll go really, I guess, into the details. But I don't know, it's not that much fun, right? I mean, you want to get that money in there, and then we start playing with it, and start seeing that nice return where it gets bigger and bigger every year. Also, just the withdrawals with the penalties. Now, I think this is a big thing to do because if you are like I was starting out, it's a little nerve-wracking putting this money away and thinking like, oh, I can never get it out, and if I do, I'm gonna incur some penalties and fees. You can take that money out, and I've had two friends have done it. I've never done it. One was a medical issue, and the other was, I think it was he had an accident with his house, and insurance wasn't covering it. One did, the medical friend did take it out, tax penalty free, and the one with the house, he did have to incur a fee, 10%, something like that. But he said, hey, I needed it. So that's the difference. I mean, we'll go into other things that I know people who, I'm thinking about that one friend, he borrowed against his retirement, which you can do. You have to pay yourself back the interest, but that's something in advance. Let's talk about that at another time. But that's the difference between Roth and traditional. I'll put a link in the description also for, I think, a Charles Schwab article, which talks about the difference. And then if there's any questions or anything, put that in the comments and I'll try to help and answer any questions you have. Okay, and just in closing for this section, I know this wasn't the most fun. Hopefully you just got the idea of listen, I got to start this, and it's really, I would say this is one of the more compulsory, if that's the word. I always forget how to pronounce that word. Mandatory things that you want to do, especially you're starting out. You want to open this up. And again, this is where we're going to begin our playground. This is where we can start experimenting, where we can start investing in funds, which I think will be the next video. Bond funds, stock funds, ETFs. You can buy stock outright, even options, everything. We can start playing around with it. But I just want to close with a lot of financial advice, and you hear this with retirement. I think it's a little cringe because they talk about the time and they say, oh, well, you can do risky stuff now. You're young, invest in this kind of thing. And I think it's the wrong mentality where it almost seems like going to risky stuff because that should have the bigger reward. Usually investment instruments, the larger the risk, the better the reward. The smaller the risk, the smaller the return, the conservative return. I always cringe when I hear that. I think it's something that you keep in the back of your mind, that this is going to be long. This is going to be with you for the rest of your life. But you don't have to be dumb. That's the thing. It's like, well, I'll talk about a good example is Netflix. It was, so this is not the case study part. We'll do that later. But it was like 2020, 2021. I forget what quarter. They had a fantastic earnings call. They were, I think, buying back stock and a bunch of stuff. And it was close to the highs. It was like 550 or something like that, 525, maybe even 575. And I liked the call so much, and I was like, oh, this is, hey, I think this is gonna go somewhere. So I bought a few shares. Sure, it went down. It didn't pan out immediately. I think right now I'm in the green by a little, but I used that retirement account and that long window because I said to myself, even if I'm wrong here, I think in 10, 20 years, there's going to be a Netflix land. There's going to be a theme park with Netflix. Netflix could have, IP that is, worth a quarter or half of what the stock is right now. So I looked at Netflix as just increasing my risk a little bit, but I wasn't being haphazard and silly and buying some penny stock or something like that I didn't know anything about. So yeah, sorry if this was a little bit of the meat and potatoes kind of thing, but we're going to get into now investing in using our retirement account. So this should be the fun part. But again, I hope you find it fun again with that building of the estate of getting the savings mindset into your brain of being that little squirrel and putting the nut away for a better day. But the thing is we're going to make that nut grow. So, all right, let's get to the you did what section. Okay, so this you did what section case study is when I bought Apple shares after Steve Jobs passed away. So I'm old. Where I remember where I was actually in finance school. I was in Baruch. It was, I forget what day and night, but it was like a Thursday night, and the news broke. I remember everyone kind of congregating around desks and in the hallways and stairwells and talking about it. Everyone had an opinion. And he was a controversial figure, but still, you felt that something changed. The world was a little bit different. Again, you can be a fan, you can be a hater, whatever, but the world was different now that he wasn't there. It was 2011, right? And so iPhone debuted in 2007. So it was 4 or 5 years after. I believe we had the iPad. But it was just a lot of talk that where's Apple going to go? Tim Cook took over. They had Johnny Ives or whatever with design. But I mean, it's hard to imagine now. Most of the talk was that Tim Cook doesn't know what he's doing, that they don't have the design chops, that they don't have the product pipeline anymore, that Steve Jobs was the one keeping that company together. And this was like the talk for a good half a year to a year. And I remember I was living in Hoboken at the time. I went on to the PATH train to go home, and I had a Fortune magazine that I was able to get somewhere for free. I forget where. And one article, I'll try to find it, was just about early Apple investors, people who fell in love with the iMac back in the early 90s or mid 90s and invested bought some shares, and now they're millionaires just based on their Apple position because of the iPhone and everything. And I remember reading that and being like, man, that's so smart, because they fell in love with this product, and this was a product that I was using. I was at Disney at the time, and so I had my first iPhone. I was using iMacs. Disney and Apple had a close relationship, or they still do, because of the whole Pixar acquisition, where you don't hear about it now, but I remember for the longest time hearing that the largest shareholder in Disney was Steve Jobs' wife. Now you don't hear that much with their whole talk with Nelson Peltz. And anyway, So I had an iPhone. I was a fan of the company, fan of the products, and I had my IRA accounts. I forget which ones at the time, traditional or Roth, maybe both. And I said, I'm going to take a take a plunge. And so I bought some Apple shares. I forget when, but of course it was right before they had probably their worst earnings call in the last 15, 20 years. So much so that the stock plummeted. Tim Cook they said he was going to get fired. They had a guy on CNBC saying that it was a broken company, that it's over. And I thought to myself, wow, out of all the great investments that people made in Apple, I've timed this one incredibly wrong. And so I just suffered with it. But the thing is kind of going to the point of the prior lesson, is that it was in my retirement accounts. I said, you know what, let's see where this goes. I'm losing right now, but we have some time. So the point of this case study is that you can be very wrong in the beginning. Timing a stock purchase is, people like to think that they're smart when they get lucky, and sure, I do the same thing. But the score of the game is when you sell it, or when you die or whatever. Now that purchase is one of the best things that I ever did. It was one of my first purchase of outright stock. Again, this was 2012. And I had to suffer a few months of being the dumbest person in the world. I think it was 6 months or so. But then it was April of 2014. I remember my fiance at the time and I were looking at apartments in Miami. First time really down here. And I put on the TV, and Apple had gangbuster results. Stock split, repurchases. I think it was the first time they were having a dividend. It was, I think the stock split 7-1, something like that. And everything in the world seemed right again. So the case study is that there's going to be a lot of negative news. There's going to be a lot of people on TV saying things. Again, Apple being a broken company. Let's think about that for a second. And then there's also the lesson of CEO or founders. We'll talk about that at length at different times. Steve Jobs was a little bit different than, let's say, a dynamic CEO like a Bob Iger, if we're talking about Disney, where he really was. Steve Jobs was really a visionary, and he created the company with Steve Wozniak, or however you say his name. It's go with your gut and don't beat yourself up once you're wrong. And if you're wrong for a long period of time and you want to cut your losses, we'll go into times where you do that as well. But if you can believe it, that's the thing. I think there's a lot of people who seen this video who couldn't imagine Apple being labeled as negatively and as horribly as they were. And the broken company, Tim Cook was a moron. They're not going to do anything anymore. It was a good feeling seeing that call and having those, when you see your total gain or loss in your account and it turns green. It's a good feeling, and we're going to get there with a bunch of stuff. So that's the lesson. Comments, questions, let me know. And let's see where Apple goes next. All right, that's the episode. Please subscribe, like, and comment any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in a future episode. Log on to Funnance.com to learn more, and let's have fun with finance.